You spoke a moment ago about the early days of your career. Did you have a mentor during that time in your career?
No. I probably would have broken fewer eggs in my early days at AT&T had I had one, but I was so odd. I was female, doing the kind of work that women were not represented in. I was a New Yorker in a company that was Midwest in its soul. I was Jewish in a company that had very few people who were, and I had been brought up in the Bronx in New York, so I was a little tougher than the culture of the company, and I broke a lot of things before I learned how to swim in that environment, get done what needed to get done. And so I think mentors are a really good thing, and I regret I didn't have one that early on. Later on, I had someone I admired enormously who shaped my view of what could be done, but not in the early days.
Do you feel that today's workplace fosters an environment for mentoring?
I think so. I think mentoring is much more understood today. I think given the kinds of advances that women have made, where for all practical purposes in most places they're operating as easily as men are, I think more men are mentoring women, and I think most particularly more women are mentoring women. I try to do that when I can today, but then I was pretty alone in the early days.
Now, what year did you join AT&T?
I joined AT&T in 1972. 1972.
So you certainly were one of the few women that worked there.
Oh, tons of women worked there, but they were telephone operators, they were in administrative roles, they were in human resources, they were
separate from
very separate
from you.
Right.
Could you speak to some of the biggest challenges that you have faced during your career?
Well, talking earlier on, I think the first major challenge I had was when I was transferred from this organization I was working in, which was basically, it had evolved. I had a job where I was working with retirees and employees on environmental projects and putting out all kinds of literature about that for anybody who would listen. Some people. But ultimately I got transferred into media relations, which is the beginning of a public relations career, and for many very excellent people, the fulfillment of a public relations career. But I knew nothing about media relations. I mean nothing. And I tried to learn. At that time, I was the only woman in that part of the group. And everybody else had been a journalist. And I hadn't been a journalist either, so I was terrified. And ultimately, I thought I would fail, and my boss said he really started to worry about me, that I was paralyzed. And ultimately, I decided that one of AT&T's problems was that because they were staffed by print journalists, they had no television public relations at all. And so I created a television approach and a little group, and hired a television specialist and started getting us on things like the Today Show and what have you. And of course there were 10 million stories that were ready to be told because we had never done anything proactively for television. And that was sort of the beginning of finding that one of the real ways to make a difference in a large organization was to create as opposed to follow the well-beaten path. And of course, between the years of the 70s, the early 80s, the late 70s, the early 80s when AT&T was broken up, and from then on, it was all about adapting to change, all about adapting to a new world. And so anyone who was not complaining about the way it was, but was ready to say, whoa, there's opportunity here to do something new, I think was more valuable. And that was the biggest challenge for me, was finding those ways. Later on, when I was in charge, the very, very largest challenges were, on the one hand, trying to help senior management adapt to the various things that those of us who have a broad view of the world could see needed to be done, other than the technical and financial aspects of the business. But we got into trouble, not often, but sometimes. And I think the most difficult times I had to overcome were two catastrophic events I was involved in. One, when our foundation, for a variety of reasons I won't bore you with now, decided to stop funding Planned Parenthood. And within a couple of weeks, our wonderful relationship with this organization, which had gone on for 16 years, we were their longest funder, turned into a cataclysmic public battle with Planned Parenthood nationally, taking ads saying hang up on AT&T. We had threats of boycott. It was just horrible, absolutely horrible. And worse, because those of us who had managed this decision were quite sympathetic to it, but for a variety of reasons having to do with the company policy and their policies, were unable to do this through our foundation. But the thing I learned was that there are public issues that are so big, so divisive, so potent, so emotional, so like tornadoes, that it doesn't matter how big and powerful you are as a business or an institution. It doesn't matter whether or not right is on your side. It doesn't matter whether you've planned well. You step into one of these issues and you are like a little rowboat in a raging sea, because the big national, public, cultural, emotional, patriotic, religious kinds of issues just cut you to pieces, and you bleed everywhere. And I learned, because I fell into another one maybe 10 years later, I learned that these were to be fudged, if possible, in such a way that you would not become a target, and that if you were going to have to deal with one of these issues, you needed to develop not just good constituency relations, which we had, but you needed to understand strategy in a very real way, and company character, and issues management at a very, very high level, or the reputational implications were just awful. We had, for 10 years following this decision, we had proxy statements regarding the funding of this organization. I mean, it was just so beyond belief. So there are crises and there are crises. And I learned a lot about crisis management through the course of our career, because God knows we had plenty of them.
At many major universities, including Penn State University, women far outnumber men in terms of enrollments for communication majors,
right,
including public relations. What is it about the field of public relations, in your opinion, that attracts women? And is that a positive or a negative aspect of the field?
I don't want to get in a Larry Summers minute here, but I think many women feel that communications is a more innate attribute. There are enough jokes about the differences between men and women in that regard. I wish I knew more about what women think the communications job is. We're talking corporate public relations, but public relations is actually a very small subset of a much larger field. And what these women believe they're going to do, I'm not sure of. So, for example, publicity, marketing communications and publicity has become a gigantic field in which women are very well represented. Political public relations, which is probably the leading edge, for better or worse, of experimentation in managing public opinion, has many women very well represented. In corporate public relations, I think it is seen as still somewhat more accessible as a field to learn than some of the engineering, software, I can't say manufacturing, but somewhat more technically related jobs. Women as well are going more into law and I know several women who are corporate secretaries of companies now. I think a better question is why aren't more men going into public relations now? And why aren't more African American and Latino men going into public relations now? And that's something I think we have to spend a little more time looking at.
What challenges do women face in today's workplace that would perhaps differ from your own experiences?
I don't know. I don't know. I think, again, one would assume, one would hope, they face fewer challenges for being women as opposed to more challenges. So that's one I can't answer. I don't know.
In 2002, you were inducted into the Page Society Hall of Fame. What did that honor mean to you, both as an executive and as a woman?
Oh, it was awesome. It was as if I had to grow up a little bit to appreciate Arthur Page, and I owe Ed Block endlessly for clearing that path for me. As I said at the Page meeting, the older I got, the smarter he got. This seemed to me to be pretty much the ultimate honor I could receive from my peers because it spoke not just to professional accomplishment, but it spoke to the Page principles. And I have believed from the day I started that the truth is the core of any successful story. And I think it was McCann Erickson, an ad agency, that coined a phrase that sums up another aspect of what we do and what was very close to me, which was truth well told. It meant a lot. It meant a lot because it was Arthur Page. As far as being a woman or being the first woman inducted into the Page Society, I have to tell you, I have never sort of seen myself through that lens. That may be the reason that I was able to be successful at AT&T was I didn't get it. I mean, I was told later about various and sundry things, but I didn't get it. I was just I was an AT&T person. I didn't even think of myself as a PR person. I thought of myself as an AT&T person with ideas that really could make a difference there. And I just never would have dreamed that I'd end up someday getting the Arthur Page Award. It was good.
It was a good day.
It was good.